Tzvi is really the real Aliyah commander. Here at Israel, when you're a commander in the army, as Mayor Indor could attest to, the commanders in the army say "Acharai," after me, and they're the ones that first are led into battle. Tzvi Fishman is definitely one that leads one into battle. Sometimes he's a little bit too quick on the gun because he forgot that we start every session, every event that we have with a blowing of the shofar that we have to blow in order to call our brethren, our brothers and sisters around the world back home. So we're going to blow the shofar. Now we can start. I was asked to start off speaking about my experiences in the United States. We went for 1 week on a mission. It was a very difficult mission. It was a rescue mission for Jews in America. And perhaps it's the hardest mission because to rescue someone who doesn't want to be rescued is very difficult. And unfortunately, when it comes to many Jews in America, they are unaware of the exile that they're in. The worst exile is the one you don't realize you're in. And many of the Jews there don't realize that they're in exile. There are those communities that come from a more Zionist leaning, like Teaneck and like others that grow up with this idea of Israel. There are others that are living in bubbles, what I call bubbles, around the United States, whether that be in Lakewood or in Muncie. And they don't really feel what's going on necessarily, the reality of what's going on the ground outside of their little bubbles. And then you have the rest of the country, the United States, where there's a 70 to 90% assimilation rate, where we're managing to do to ourselves what Hitler, Yamach Shemo, was not able to do to us. And we're losing the Jews very, very quickly. That is one danger. We have the assimilation and the spiritual danger, but there's also a physical danger. The window of opportunity is closing very rapidly for Jews around the world. The United States is not going to end any differently than any other exile that has ended throughout history. Every Jewish exile ends the same way. Every empire has a rise and has a fall. I think everybody in America, Jew and non-Jew, feels that the United States is right now in a free fall. And there are some that claim that the upcoming elections is going to resolve that, whether they're on one side or the other. But our feeling is that regardless of who gets into power in the next election, it is going to be a disaster for the Jewish people. And that's not to take away from the great things that President Trump has done for Israel in the past. But the United States currently is on the brink of a civil war. Whatever happens, whatever the results of the upcoming elections, half of the country is not going to accept the results of the elections. It's very scary. I may have mentioned in the last conference that my gauge of how do I know where it is safest for a Jew to be is where you can openly be Jewish in the streets. And here in Israel, more than ever before, people are openly Jewish in the streets, while around the world, people are hiding the fact that they're wearing a kippah, they're hiding their tzitzis, they're hiding their Mogen Davids, they're hiding the fact that they're Jewish. I may have shown this last time. I'm going to grab it again. Hold on. So this is a product I purchased on my trip to the United States. It is called the Camo Zoza. I don't know if you've ever heard of the Camo Zoza. The Camo Zoza is a product made in the US of A. And basically what it is a plastic box. Rabbi, have you seen this? It's a plastic box with a blinking red light. It imitates an alarm system, and you can put it over your mezuzah to hide the fact that you're Jewish. This is a product that's being sold in the United States today. How does it work? It looks like an alarm system, so people won't see the mezuzah. It just looks like an alarm system. It's scary. It's very scary. It was, when people asked, I stayed when I was in the United States this past time. I was staying in the 5 towns, and I told everybody that I chose to stay there because it's very close to the JFK airport. So I wanted to be very close in case I had to escape. I wanted to be very close to the airport. We had a very interesting trip. The main events that we went to, where the goal of the trip was to try to meet as many Jews as possible during the trip. And the 2 main events that we went to, one was called the Israel Day Parade. There were tens of thousands of Jews at this parade on the streets of Fifth Avenue in Manhattan. And there, predominantly, the people that attended this parade were pro-Israel. That's why they came. So on one hand, it may have been easy to speak to these people, but we had a little bit of a gimmick in order to try to get their attention. And we had these big signs that said, Jews go home. Jews go home to Israel. And those signs, people weren't sure exactly what to make of it. In fact, one of the funny stories of the trip, I'll tell you 2 stories. One was that when we were driving up, Shabbat we spent outside of Boston. And when we were driving up I-95 from New York to Boston, we had this huge truck, and on the sides it had these big signs, Jews go home, big Israeli flag on the hood and on the back. And we got all these people giving us the thumbs up, some of us giving us another finger, and beeping their horns, cheering. And then I only realized once I got to Boston that many of these were probably anti-Semites that agreed with our message that Jews should go home. The Jews were probably not as enamored as the non-Jews were by the message. The second story was actually one of the best stories of the trip, which is when we were holding these signs, Jews go home, right in front of the security entrances to the parade. So a woman and her elderly mother come over to me, and they look at the sign, and they look a little bit confused, as many people did. But then they said, you're not going to believe this. They said, we just came back from shul. We were davening. And we asked Hashem, please give us a sign that we should move to Israel. And we come back from shul, and we walk over to the parade. And we see you holding this giant sign. It says, Jews go home. So clearly God was answering our prayer. The other event that we went to was a little bit more of a difficult crowd. It was called Kosherpalooza. For those that don't know what that is, I didn't know what it was. Kosherpalooza is an event that is in Secaucus, New Jersey. There are about 4,000 Jews in attendance, and it's a kosher food festival. And they have every kind of foods you could imagine. And the Jews that go there predominantly are from the yeshivish / Hasidic communities. And they're coming there to eat and dine, to have the best kosher foods that could be found on the face of the earth. Little did they know that we had another plan for them, and we had a table set up at this event that had Aliyah in mind, and we had these huge signs and flags, and we managed to accost probably 1,000 of them. That was actually much more significant, I think, than the Israel Day Parade, because those are people that Israel is not even on their radar. As I mentioned in my opening, for many people that are living in bubbles, Israel is not even what everybody feels. The ground shaking. Everybody feels there's something going on in the United States. They just don't know how to channel it. And there are some people that think the way to channel is if it gets too dangerous in New York, obviously we're gonna move. Where are we gonna move to? We'll move to Florida. We'll move to Texas. Obviously, those are the safe havens in America. In LA, they're also moving to Florida and Texas. So there are people that just don't understand that Israel, they weren't brought up with, they weren't educated the way that many of us were with this idea that Israel is the Jewish homeland. And unfortunately, it's going to take a lot of education and a lot of planting seeds, is which what we were doing there. We were planting seeds. We were talking to different people, and we were trying to, for the first time maybe in their lives, to hear the message that it's time to come home. It's fascinating because I'm going back and forth to the United States on these trips for many years now, and I remember once being in a community, and I've since heard that this happens very often. It was Parashat Lech Lecha. And I said, for sure, the rabbi of the community is going to get up and speak about Eretz Yisrael. What else would you speak about on Parashat Lech Lecha except Eretz Yisrael? And the rabbi got up, and he spoke and spoke and spoke and didn't mention Eretz Yisrael in the whole speech. Lech Lecha means you have to go into yourself. You have to be introspective. And Israel was not even mentioned in the speech. And it's very disturbing. One of the highlights, perhaps always a highlight for me, of my trip is meeting my Rebbe, Rav Herschel Schechter. And I went to him and I expressed this issue, this complaint, this challenge, that there are many rabbis in America that are afraid to speak out. It's not that they're not pro-Israel. It's not that they're not pro-Aliyah. They're afraid to speak out. They're afraid of their boards. They're afraid of their jobs. They're afraid of feeling hypocritical, that who are they to tell someone else to make Aliyah when they themselves haven't made Aliyah. By the way, my standard answer to that is always the same, which is that maybe Rabbi Brzezinski, who's going to speak next, can attest to this. Once an American rabbi, no matter how influential they were in America, steps off the plane in Israel, they are no longer an American rabbi. Right? They're one of those Israeli Zionist rabbis, so we don't have to listen to them. While they're in their positions in the shuls in America, in the communities in America, that is when they have the most potential. That is when they are actually able to influence their followers and their congregants. Once they come there to Israel, it may be too late to have that type of influence. So I spoke to Rav Schechter about it. Rav Schechter was kind enough to make a number of videos for us, one calling out to the rabbis. These can be seen, by the way, if you go to YouTube, to Israel Torah. One of them is calling out to rabbis in America and basically says that just like you have an obligation as a rabbi in America to speak about all different Torah laws that are necessary for us to keep. You have to speak about the laws of Shabbat, and you have to speak about the laws of Kashrut. So likewise, you also have to speak about the halakha that Jews have to be in Eretz Yisrael. They have to get up and they have to move to Eretz Yisrael. That's one of the obligations of all rabbis to speak about in their congregations. After that video that he made, I asked him a question, which I've gotten many times, this question, which is, since Simchat Torah, since October 7th, how could I dare say that it is safer for a Jew to be in Eretz Yisrael than it is to be in New York, than it is to be in London, than it is to be in Canada, in Toronto? What are you talking about? These mass massacres of Jews, they're not happening where we are. They're happening in Israel. So I asked Rav Schechter for his opinion on that also. He immediately, even though I wasn't planning a video, I said, turn on the video again. I have something to say about that as well. And he gives, and I'll leave that as a teaser. You can go and listen to what he has to say. He clearly does not believe that that is true. And he believes, as we do, that Eretz Yisrael is the safest place for a Jew to be. There's an interesting midrash. I'm sure I mentioned it at a previous conference that we've had. There's a midrash that says, La'osid Lovo, at the end of times, that the Eretz Yisrael is going to look like a huge hurricane. And Jews that are outside of the land of Israel, they're going to be looking at Israel, and they're going to see this huge hurricane, and they're going to say this is for sure the most dangerous place to be. But those that are in Israel, those that are in the eye of the storm, they're right in the middle of this hurricane, it's going to be completely calm here. The calm of the storm. It's only the people that are looking from the outsider that are going to see that this is the most dangerous place to be. Indeed, we believe that this is a very, very scary and dangerous times for Jews around the world. It's getting scarier by the day. Everybody feels it, and our call is clear that it is time to come home. One of the most important messages that we gave during our and this was actually given to us by the representative of Nefesh B'Nefesh, so I owe him credit for this, was that just like there is an old custom that one has a Mashiach bag. One has a bag set aside for when the Messiah comes, with a suit in it and a nice tie and a nice hat. Put everything ready so when the Messiah announces that he's here, that he's come, you have everything ready to be put on. So he added that in addition to having your suit and your tie in this bag, you should also make sure to have a valid passport. You should have your letter from your rabbi that says that you are eligible for Aliyah. You should have your birth certificate with a pastille. All your paperwork should be ready. So when it comes time to make Aliyah, the thing that delays Aliyah the most is that people don't have their paperwork together. There were times, even during Corona, that people couldn't get this paperwork, right? The offices were all closed, and there was no way of getting the paperwork. People were desperate to get the paperwork in. If you have that all together in your Mashiach bag, then you're already a step ahead of everyone else that is going to be online to get into the Eretz Israel. You may have noticed our backdrop over here, besides the very nice signs that we have here about the Jews and the sinking of America and the fact that the majority of Olim today are not Jewish. Again, I also have to mention that depends on the time period. That's not throughout the history of the Medinat Yisrael. That's a more recent thing, and it's not also what's coming from North America, where the majority of them are Jewish. And the tent, you may be wondering why we have a tent here. It's not in case there is an alarm and the missiles are coming down, we should all get into the tent. It is more so to send a message. Right now, one can come to Eretz Israel and they can still liquidate their properties in Chutz La'aretz, and they can come here and they can still buy an apartment. Okay, it might not be as nice of an apartment as you would have gotten 10 years ago or 20 years ago. Prices are definitely on the rise. They're appreciating at a rapid supply and demand. There's a huge demand and a very, very limited supply. But at some point, even the Jew that owns the $1 million home in America is not going to be able to find properties here. The inventory is limited. And at some point, they may find themselves being in one of these instead of being in their mansion in the United States, in L.A., in the 5 towns. We don't have to mention places. Wherever they are, right, they may have to be in one of these tents. So this is the time. The time is now to come home, to find your place, to find whether it be in Yerushalayim or other communities that are popping up, Anglo communities all over Eretz Israel, and to start. And the best way to do that, by the way, and this is another point, the best way to do that is to come as a community. Right? If you're able to come as a community, you can make a mass purchase. The rabbi's able to come. He can still have his job as the rabbi. You can have a mass purchase of apartments on paper, and you can buy them cheaper on paper. And you can keep your community. You can keep your neighbors. You can keep everything that you wanted. We have one of our domains for our website is asgoodasgullus.com. You can have it as good as Gullus. You can have Eretz Israel.